All right, everybody, welcome to the next episode of the Digital Marketing Agency Builders podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Narducci, and today I have with me Dan Englander. Dan is the CEO and founder of Sales Schema, a fractional business team for marketing agencies. Prior to founding Sales Schema, Dan was the first employee and head of new business at IdeaRocket, as well as the account coordinator at DXagency. Currently, Dan and his team have executed over 7,000 campaigns, won millions in lifetime revenue, and have generated 3,000 plus agency brand meetings for clients with companies such as Birchbox, Stripe, and Venmo. Thanks so much for joining us and being on the show today.
Thanks, Tyler. Yeah, really appreciate it.
All right, cool. So let's just dive right in. So for the people who don't know you, give us a little window into your journey as an agency owner and why people should pay attention to what you have to say.
Yeah, totally. So my background originally was in the agency space, kind of first working on the account side. I was working for a social media agency in the New York area. And basically I was there, like must have been like 2011 when you could just say I'm a social media agency and companies would just like throw money at you.
Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, we need that, please. And like
yeah,
the
what is
run
that?
by
We need somebody
65-year-olds
to.
that have never been on Facebook.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry to interrupt. I was just going to say, it was when the word community manager was big, right? And that's like
Yeah.
a title that's gone away because it's just sort of integrated with everything else now. So I was kind of doing that sort of thing. I was like literally like one of our clients was a big electronics brand, and people would complain on a Facebook wall, and I'd have to answer them. So from there, landed in a different gig, and I was essentially in kind of a hybrid sales client service role for an animation studio called IdeaRocket, and then helped them grow over time, kind of dealt with the challenges of like shuffling back and forth between selling and clients in a small shop. And I was basically selling animated video to big companies and agencies. So I was kind of like, integrated in the agency world, learned a lot from that, eventually helped them grow to seven figures and a bunch of Fortune 500s and other braggadocio. And then around 2014 or so, kind of took the Tim Ferriss pill and quit my job, traveled Asia. I self-published a book about account management, which is what I was doing and everything that I had learned from it for an area that I thought wasn't really covered very well, which was how do you manage that shuffle? Like, okay, there's a million sales books out there. There's a million client service books out there. And all of them will tell you to do good stuff, but like, what do you do when you don't have enough time and energy and there's only so many hours in the day? So that was written a while ago. There's a lot of things I'd update at this point, but that was kind of my jumping off point. I wanted to build something that could scale, from my own standpoint. And also I saw that the biggest need with some of my early consulting clients was going out past referrals and personal networks and growth. So I felt like the lead gen space was overall not really good for agencies and for people selling in a consultative sales process. So that was Sales Schema, and started that around 2014, 2015. And we've, evolved a lot since then and have learned a lot in the process. So I'll leave it at that for now. Yeah.
That's awesome. I love the whole, and then I moved to Asia for a little bit that you just threw in there. Where in Asia did you go?
Yeah, so I did a couple stints. The first one was like 3 months, and I did Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, Myanmar, which is really cool because I got lucky and got there in the window before they shut it down again.
Yeah.
And Indonesia basically, and then I went back and did Japan and Thailand on a different trip. Yeah.
That is so awesome. So they were always designed to be trips. They weren't like, I'm gonna work and live here.
Yeah, it's a good question. They were kind of hybrid, right? So I remember the first one I did. I remember being in this loft above, there's like a lofty treehouse sort of area at a hostel in Pai, which is up in the mountains in northern Thailand.
That sounds so cool.
And after taking a motorbike up there and almost dying, and being on a conference call with like a new consulting client, this was 2014. And I'm just thinking like, wow, this is fun and interesting, but I don't know if I could do this for forever. So
yeah,
now
that was going to be I was going to ask you like, what ultimately drove you back to the States?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, I mean, I was never like one of these multi-year digital nomad types. I always did like a few months.
Yeah.
I also did Brazil for like a month and a half, which was really fun. But I think now, it's like there's kind of like a schizophrenia to it where it's like, well, what am I doing? Am I building a company that's serious and that can grow and has employees, and like, or am I, doing the digital nomad thing? And I found that there's kind of a fork in the road where you can go one way or the other. And decided to come back and to focus on the business more, be less.
That's really
time zones
cool.
are hard. Yeah.
You could probably do an entire podcast episode on that, because I think a lot of people like they idolize the whole digital nomad thing and they like romanticize it. And while traveling is super awesome and I love it too, like I couldn't imagine trying to continually push Sobi Viral forward and grow the business like substantially while like sitting on a beach in Bali. Like, you know, I feel like I totally get that fork. And that's why I haven't really ever gone down the digital nomad track, but have taken several trips and enjoyed them and for what they were, and then come back to get more serious. So I think that's a cool point.
Yeah, absolutely.
So speaking on sales and not have to worry about it, but striking the balance between automation and customization, which is more like personal and really, you know, cutting through the noise of the other automators.
It's a good question. To kind of frame that out a bit, there's a book that I'm reading right now that I love, called The Road Less Stupid by Keith Cunningham. And he talks about, I don't, maybe you know this book too, but he talks about the idea of, you know, when there's like a merry-go-round and you can push it. And I guess it's kind of like a flywheel, but the flywheel kind of keeps moving for a long time. But I think the merry-go-round is like a better metaphor where you can like get this thing spinning and then you can leave it and it'll spin on its own. But eventually it'll like stop and you'll have to like restart it again. And that's really what entropy is. Like things kind of fall apart. So this idea that like you're going to create an automated machine that's going to just work without you, I think is not really, doesn't map to reality. And I think the way that you get leverage is by hiring really good people and kind of like letting them run with stuff. So that's kind of the foundation for everything else are people that can think creatively and do this. Is tactically, right, when we're thinking about sales and getting meetings, which is kind of our forte, I think that it's really about front loading the work of prospect identification and finding the people that are already going to be likely to talk to you, as opposed to backloading the work, which is what you hear a lot about, which is, you know, hey, we're going to, you know, not spend much time building a list. We're going to check some boxes, industry, title, etc., and then put people through this complex funnel and then hope that they're ready to buy. And then if that doesn't work, we'll go back and forth on subject lines. That I think has become less effective for reasons that I can get into. But I think it's really, you know, it's really about having enough volume where you can get a reasonable number of meetings. For context, for our clients who are agencies typically selling to mid to large companies, we might be contacting like 50 to 200 people per business day. But that's a number whereby we can really find the people that are going to be likely to talk to our clients. So I'll leave it at that for now because there's a lot more I can get into.
Yeah, no, we could definitely expand upon that. I think like when I try to think about a balance between automation and customization, I think about, you know, we use this invite only, in my program, we use this invite only software to LinkedIn that sends out connection requests and you can have like these follow-up messages, right? But you know, you can't just like turn that on and let those 3 follow-up messages land you clients, right? So what it will do is it does like a lot of the heavy lifting in the beginning by sending out all those connection requests, whereas you sitting at a computer trying to freaking connect with everybody would take hours. But what it does is it finds, you know, the people that connect, then they go into a little bit of a message sequence, and then a human being comes in and takes over with a real conversation, makes it personable. And so the quantity was done through automation, but the quality of the conversation was done through customization, as in the person, you know, the agency owner or somebody on their team taking over that conversation. And that's kind of one example I can think of, you know, in our Done for Agency program that's marries those two really well.
Yeah, no, that sounds like a great example. And I think you kind of hit on a core point where there has to be a lot of creative thinking that goes into using the automation. It's almost like, you know, you wouldn't give a bazooka to a 5-year-old because they're not going to be able to get, right? Or there's probably a better metaphor there. So yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, I really can't stand the whole like concept of like 100% automated agency or Shopify store or like any of that like whole world, because the reality is like if you're going to have a successful 6-7 figure agency and scale it, like it's not a bunch of robots doing everything for you. And then you're sitting on a beach in Bali collecting checks. Like that's
Right.
not real. It doesn't exist. But like, I think that thought it exists plenty in the world.
And I get it. I have that thought probably once a week, right? Like we all do. But I think if you want that, like, you sell your business and then you have a month of vacation and then you probably go crazy and then find something else to,
100%.
that's
100%.
the play. Yeah, and I was just going to add, I think for our process, to give people a little more context on like what we're up to, usually we're going after very skeptical buyers, right, in big companies, and our goal is only to de-risk the conversation. I think this is the big mistake people make, is they're trying to do too much with that outreach. They're trying to sell people on things, give them case studies, and the problem with that is none of that stuff's going to be relevant to them unless they're ready to buy right now, right? And if they're ready to buy right now, and you're just relying on that luck, that's not really going to be sustainable, because even the people that are ready to buy right now might not trust you enough to take the call, even though their case studies might be vaguely interesting. Right? So the way that we're thinking about it, to give like an example of a campaign right now, is we have a client that is in the events business, right? This is not an easy sell, especially over the last year or two, right? With everything going on. They're selling into the biggest tech companies on earth, like the Semantics, the HPs of the world, and that kind of thing. And what we knew is, we're like, if we just go in cold and say, like, we're an events business, can we pitch you on stuff? If they're nice, they'll say, when we're thinking about an event, well, sure, or they'll just tell us to go away. So what we did is, like, we're first taking an account-based approach. That's not always the way to go, but it often is, right? If you're sufficiently specialized and niched. So we have this account-based list that we've gotten approved. And then on the other hand, like, what we find, and probably a lot of your listeners and our clients are kind of like sitting on gold, right? Like, they have this Rolodex, they have their network, and they have people, and they've survived on referrals, right? So our whole thing is like, why jump 5 circles or 5 paces past that to somebody that's cold? Why not go like 1 layer past them to the people that you might have gotten referred to anyway, right? In your circles of influence. And that's a whole thing I can ramble about, is the idea of circles of influence. So what we do is, like, we say, okay, our client, we're saying, export a list of all your contacts. You can do that through LinkedIn or your email contacts, whatever. And tell us everybody you feel comfortable asking for an intro from, like your business acquaintances, right? So you might omit, your family or people, clients or whatever. But from there, we might have a good, number of contacts that are pre-approved, like 50, 100, 200. From there, what we're able to do through the data and blah, 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 secret sauce, proprietary, et cetera, we're able to map who those people know within those pre-approved accounts, right? And then send everybody in that first degree batch, hey, Bob, haven't connected in a while. I wanted to get on a call. Our clients get on that call and say, hey, I saw you're connected to these 2 or 3 people in these accounts. Would you be willing to help me? Do you know these people? Can you make an intro? And people will help if you're specific about what you want. So it takes a little more work. There's definitely some hustle there, but it's the best thing we know, because it's getting these referrals at scale. So I know I'm rambling. I want to give you the floor in a second. But I just
awesome.
say that
I love the technique. That's really cool.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I think even if people never hire us, I think if you're doing this yourself, the way to think about this is like, where do your circles of influence live, right? And can you prioritize those prospects, right? So instead of thinking of like just the perfect title and going in cold, are there people that attended the same trade show as you? Are there people that you haven't connected with in a while that would already take a call with you, that are likely to know the people that you know? And then starting there, and that might not mean a complex funnel. It might literally be 1 email just batched up to 50 people in a day. And that will take you a lot further than a lot of the cold outreach stuff. That stuff's good too. But that's kind of how we're thinking about it for clients. Yeah.
I love it. It's like going after the low hanging fruit before climbing to the top of the tree kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Love it. So we just entered a new year now in 2022. So what opportunities and challenges do you see for agency owners this year?
Yeah, I think the ones that I observe are probably pretty obvious to most people. So they might not be anything shocking, but I think the biggest challenge is just competition. I think the whole world went digital, and there's more competition than ever because everyone is becoming an agency. Like, even on the biggest levels, like the New York publishers are agencies now. The New York Times has a full service agency, and at the same time, tech companies are becoming agencies and tech companies are becoming publishers, and like everything's kind of morphing together. So there's sort of this perception of commoditization. Even if you actually do have a differentiator, the challenge is like people aren't going to get to experience that until they've already started working with you, or at least gotten into a sales process, right? There's just not enough attention for them to read a case study and have you like stand out because you have a bunch of logos and you have various metaphors on your site or whatever, right? So that's the biggest challenge. I think the opportunity, though, is that the small distributed fractional teams are the most attractive game in town, right? That's going to be more attractive for brands, for anybody you're selling to, than trying to hire somebody in-house, because that talent is really hard to find, especially when we're talking about new stuff like Amazon or other things like that. And also that it's just the ramp up speed and the ability to kind of move quickly with a fractional team is very attractive. So that's kind of where I see, the challenge and the opportunity.
Can you briefly explain what you mean by a fractional team?
Yeah, so that's kind of how we describe ourselves. We're a fractional new business team, and we specialize on agencies and other B2B service verticals. So it's sort of it's providing a portion of the service that you would get from hiring a full service employee, but done in a team model in a way that's often better, faster, cheaper, just depending on the details. If that makes sense.
Oh yeah, no, I always tell a lot of our done for agency clients, like that's one of your biggest selling points is that, you can hire a CMO or you can hire a marketing manager for your company, but you're only going to get the skill of that one person. Whereas if you hire our team, often for equal to or lesser than the value, monetary value of that CMO or marketing manager, then you're going to get the full strength of all of our team members working on your account. We have a paid ads, division, we have, graphic design, SEO, we have all of that. And you're getting the power of all of those instead of just hiring one person. And in many cases, that one person is going to go out and try and find a marketing agency anyway, to manage. So it's just like, in many cases, it makes a lot of sense. So while I know there are many, what is one system that you see working well for growing an agency? There's a lot to pick from, so feel free.
Yeah, and it also just depends on like how we define system and everything. I think like I could go super tactical with sales process and like the stuff we do. And I think mostly it's nothing that new or out of left field. I think specialization is probably the biggest system. I think it's getting very hard to be kind of like the old school agnostic agency where you have a million different verticals you work with. I think it's possible to have that if you do something that's like really special and hard to replicate, like you have a weird service, or like we have clients that work with high compliance verticals and they deal with like SOC 2 stuff, which is like related to electronic data compliance, and they work with like banking and finance and like education and government or whatever. And that, so it doesn't necessarily have to be niching to like one vertical, but I think that it's going to be pretty tough to not specialize as an agency. So I think that's probably like one of the bigger foundational systems. From
Totally
there,
agree.
I think it's really timeless stuff. I think it's more about people, either out of house companies like ours that are specialized, or in-house, hiring really good people. And I know that's not that's pretty cliche and maybe not that useful, but it's hard to find a better system than that. Yeah.
Yeah, I would think one of the biggest systems that I see working well right now with a lot of the agencies that we work with is just their sales process and their sales system. So I've seen a lot of agencies just try to wing it on sales, and it always just ends in like complete disaster, especially with a person who's not trained in high ticket sales or has no background in taking those type of calls. And it can be a real nightmare situation. Just having a structure for a call number one and a call number two with a potential client can make so much of a difference. And like understanding how to get at their pain points, understanding how to get out their goals, and then understanding how to take a strategy from your team, and then effectively convey that and the value in that, compared to your price tag, which should be much lower than the value that you're giving, and effectively delivering that on a call number two or three with the lead. is really, a huge lever of success with the agencies that I've seen. Whereas like, we'll start working with agencies who, like I said, are winging it on their sales process, and they get on a call and they're like, oh yeah, we can definitely help you with Facebook ads. And it's going to be, a 5K setup and a 3K retainer. How's that sound? And they're like it just like, it doesn't land, they don't close at all. And the reason is, that there was no customization there was no, I'm going to talk to my team, there was no strategy, there was just, a price tag pulled out of the air, and the value wasn't really there. And so I think, just from my own experience, that one of the most important systems possible is having a successful sales system.
Yeah, that I couldn't agree more. And I'll just add to that. That's one of those things that will strike a nerve with me, where sometimes not I think most people we talk to are at least cognizant of their issue, and they're like, yeah, we've built it on referrals, we're flying by the seat of our pants, we want to get this right. But
Yeah.
pretty often I'll hear somebody say, and it's often like a creative founder, creative director, nothing against creatives, they do amazing work, but it'll often be an opinion sort of like, well, we're different, we're special, we sell a creative service. It's hard to scale the sales process out, and the rules don't apply to us, or something like that. And I'll just be like, look, I think on the last time that got brought up, I was like, this sounds like kind of a New York flex, but I was like, look, I'm in New York, I'm looking out on the skyline right now from this co-working space, and I'm looking at like literally thousands of skyscrapers filled with complex service companies that have scaled to multinational levels, selling agency services, consulting, legal, like really complex, expensive services. Like, what makes you think that you are different than them, or that the same rules don't apply to you, or whatever? Like, all those companies were able to do that because they hired salespeople, whether you call them salespeople or give them a different title. They
Yeah.
develop systems, they practice calls, they practice proposals, they got, they did their process just like everyone else does. Like, why do you think that you're different than that? So anyways,
Well, the reason
I'm
is
ranting.
it comes down to ego,
Yeah.
right? Like, I've failed at it personally. So it's not my own tactic or technique. It's the industry. It's the niche. It's doable because I wasn't able to do it. That's ultimately where that comes from.
Yeah.
Um, So our listeners, for the most part, understand that cold email does work for agency lead gen, but how can you tastefully send cold emails and not be, so spammy?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I won't lie, it's not easy. And there are, and like, as you're getting started with this, there's going to be people that call you spam. And I remember, like, when I was in college, I was in a music class, and the professor said, "How do you define noise?" And everyone's like, "Oh, well, everyone got cerebral," and they're like, "Noise is this, it's that. It has to do with the way, the bandwidth or the decibel level or something." And then he was like, "No, noise is just any unwanted sound." So if you listen to how people define spam, it's really just any email they don't want to get. There's not any one definition for spam. One man spams, and another man's treasure.
That's so true.
So that's the first thing, is just like, stop being scared of that, because you're really defining it as, if you're getting started with this, you're probably going to send people emails they don't want to get. And does that mean you're spamming? It's like, I don't know. It depends on the level. And if you do it too much, then yeah, it's going to be ineffective and it's not going to work and everything. So to answer your question, I mean, for us, it's really about creating the effect where every single person that gets that email thinks it was just for them, even though we're doing it at scale, right? So there's different ways to do that. There's not one way to skin the cat kind of thing. But I think for us, it's usually finding a strong connection where people can't ignore it, right? And often that's through mutual connections, right? So that doesn't have to be LinkedIn. There's other ways to do that. It's not just a LinkedIn strategy, but it's really kind of identifying those prospects, right? So reaching out and saying, hey, I think we know some of the same people, including these specific people. It could mean we've had campaigns that are really successful that reference mutual interests, colleges, hometowns. I think that's a really common one, just to give people a tactic they can use. Doesn't work as well in New York or in LA, because that's a massive city.
Yeah.
But if you're in a Denver, if you're in an Austin, if you're in a Nashville, and you're able to start with the companies in your backyard and say, hey, we're down the street for you in Nashville, that's going to be a harder email to ignore. Yeah, they could still ignore it, but it's going to be a higher reply rate, higher meeting rate, and they're at least not going to be mad at it. And that's the problem, is when people get mad at it, then they click that spam button, you get put in jail,
Yeah.
and so on. So not literal jail, but inbox jail, and then
Yeah.
and so on. So hopefully that's kind of how we think about it. Yeah.
I really like that first point that you made, that like just because some people think it's spammy or are going to unsubscribe, or I mean, I even got an email. This one drives me crazy because it's just like, oh, the ignorance. People reply to the email and say unsubscribe me when like the unsubscribe button is there. Like it just, oh my God. But like there's always going to be like that certain amount of people. Like there's always going to be people that comment on your ads, negative, hateful crap and stupid memes and everything. And I think it's really important, like if you're a new agency owner getting into the space and getting into your lead gen and sending out cold emails, running paid ads, and whatever you're doing to attract clients, that you understand that there are going to be people that respond negatively and call you spam and scams and all types of crazy stuff. And not to see that crazy person saying that thing and be like, oh my God, like, right. And I need to throw out the whole technique, because they're just like one little tiny portion of it and it's never going to go away. I've talked to many people who get like a negative, nasty comment on their ads and they think like, should we change the strategy? And I'm like, no, like,
Yeah,
it's always going to be there. Like get thick skin in this game, because that is it. So I really, really like that point. And I do like the tip of, using the hometowns. That's really, really cool. And I can imagine that will cut through. I have saw a software. I don't know where it is now or what it's called, but it was like, you sent an email and it showed like you holding a whiteboard with their name on it, and it didn't look digital. Like it looked real. And I was impressed by that.
yeah. So there's like an arms race going on right now with AI and with audio and like stuff that's gonna, on the non-sales front is gonna be kind of like the deep fake sort of thing. And over the next few years, that's gonna get really crazy, because I think right now the people doing that are at the cutting edge, and there aren't a lot of them. I know people that do that, and it works really, really well. But I think it's going to get to a place where we all are more skeptical of the sort of outreach that we're getting, because that you can create that whiteboard, you can create an audio thing where it's like my face talking and saying, hey Tyler, how's it going, but like it's all AI that's doing it. So I think, I could be wrong about this, but my hypothesis is the stuff that's timeless is going to be your relationships and your connections and the place where you physically are and those things that don't go away, right? And so that's the sort of thing we like to lean into. And I'm not saying that other stuff doesn't work, I think, and I'm not saying it's like wrong or bad. I'm just saying I want to think about the stuff that's still going to work 10 years from now. And I think if you can say, hey, Bob, I saw know Tyler, I just had a really great time on his podcast. We talked about these things. I saw you're an agency and you're doing great work. Can we find some time to talk or whatever, put more eloquently than that while Bob may or may not want to talk, that's like a tougher email to ignore, even 5 years from now.
Yeah.
So that's kind of
sure.
how we
that bringing it back to like foundations and that real personal connection. I often talk about when talking about sales, like I'll ask, our DFY program members, like, what is it like when they close a big deal and they're all pumped up? I'm like, all right, so we all have access to the same sales training and sales scripts and all that kind of stuff. So, but what do you think was the thing beyond the resource that you have that actually landed that deal for you? Like, what would you say? And almost everyone always says it was because the customer and me connected on the call, and they really truly believed that I wanted to help them, and I conveyed that honestly. Whereas they've talked to other agencies and other people that it was really more about closing the deal, getting the money, or at least that they felt that way, right? And so like what you say is true in all aspects of growing agency, and especially on the sales side. It's like, if you can really make that connection and impress upon them that you're not just trying to make them another client, but that you're truly trying to help them solve the problem in their business, that helps them get to the result that they're after. And the result may not be just $1 million in revenue. The result may be an increased revenue so that they can better take care of their kids and their family and whatever their root reason is. But making those real connections and that genuine bond essentially over a call with a stranger is what is ultimately going to be the thing that, like you said, stands the test of time, 5 years, 10 years. that will land deals for these types of companies.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I think that with agency services, I mean, if you sell, you know, like a crypto tech product or something, people will take that call because it's new and interesting, and it doesn't matter what your connection is. Like, I would just be blasting out cold emails to get an appointment for that. But give it, months or years, and that company like that is going to be in a similar boat to where agencies are, where you're dealing with a skeptical market. They might not understand everything about what you do, but they understand generally the problem you solve and how you solve it, whether you're social media or you do digital marketing, whatever. And in that situation, the scarce commodity is trust, right? It's basically, I've been burned by an agency before,
Yep.
like, can I even trust that you're not going to waste my time on this call, much less in an engagement where I hire you? So then the question is, like, how do you de-risk that call? How do you build that trust? And I think a really good timeless way to do that is through relationships and through like the commonalities that you already have, not so much referencing, hey, I saw you posted about this. It's like, great, everyone saw I
Yeah.
posted about that.
And not so much like getting into the weeds of like lookalike audiences and just like all the technical weeds. It's really, communicating that the effectiveness of, what you do and leveraging those connections, like you said. What would be your biggest advice for an agency owner that's kind of, let's say they're doing the freelancing thing, they're doing well, they have, they leverage their local network, and they have, a few mom and pops down the road, but they're kind of capped out now. They're making about $10,000 a month. They're doing all the work themselves. And they are kind of that one-man band LLC that dreams of becoming like an actual agency, but when in reality, it's just like them doing all the work. And they've been successful at this point to get to 10K, but they want to get to 100K. What would you say to that person to help them get out from under their business and actually grow their agency?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I don't think there's one way to do this. I've seen exceptions to this, but I think the most common model that I think is going to have the highest probability of success is the first order of operations is getting the fulfillment off your plate, right? So you might need to hustle, and then maybe you're hiring relatively cheap talent. Maybe it's outsourced at first. And then from there, as soon as possible, looking to hire like one A player that can do all the fulfillment. If you can do that sooner rather than later, that's ideal. From there, you're in the sales seat, and you might be there for a long time. How long? I don't know. Like, for me, it was 6 years or so.
Wow. You're
And
taking
maybe,
calls for your agency for 6
I'm not
years.
saying it will be 6 years. I think I was in it longer than some people. At the same time, I know agency owners that are 100-person agencies have been around for 2 decades, and they still haven't figured out how to get sales off their plate. And they're like, yeah, nobody can do this but me. There's issues there, and probably somebody can. So there, but suffice to say, there could be a good stretch where you're in that sales seat until you've built the systems for teeing up leads, for closing deals, for keeping clients long enough, so that you can then hire that A player salesperson. That's probably going to be like a 6-figure role, all said and done. So that's kind of the genesis of it. But I think the first thing is like, get fulfillment off your plate so you can sell.
100%. And I think that there's like a few mental barriers that a lot of freelancers have to that. And like, no one can do it better than me. Like you already said, a lot of startup agency owners have that. And then B, it's facing the fact that, well, I'm making $10,000 now, but if I bring in a fulfillment team to take it off of my plate, I'm going to be making less. And so you actually, in order to grow, you have to be willing to accept less money in the short term in order to bring in more clients to get, scale, and then you'll make more money. So it's, I know that at least that was a hard thing for me, was when I was at that 10K point, I was like, I don't want to make less than this now. And if I bring in people, I'm going to make less than this, but it was a necessary dip to rise. And I think a lot of us feel that.
Yeah, and we're going through that now. Just kind of like, we had a huge year, and now we're just like reinvesting in growth, and it's sort of like a, if not now, then when sort of thing. But I think, if you're at an earlier stage and you're kind of trying to figure out, if you're going to just continue to be a freelancer, and there's nothing wrong with that if you enjoy the work, or if you want, but if that's one road, but if you go the other road, and you want to build a business, then what I've sort of thought about more lately is like learning business is its own discrete skill set. It's not an accumulation of just like sometimes like I used to think of it as, well, it's, an accumulation of these other life skills put together. And that's not untrue. There aren't other life skills that aren't conducive to business, but it's really like its own thing. Like if you were good at running and you wanted to be a tennis player, you'd have to learn how to play tennis. You'd have to learn how to like do that thing. And just because you're good at running, okay, that helps a little, but it's its own skill set, same with the guitar versus saxophone, right? Like whatever. So I think that's the thing. And oftentimes, like if people are looking to go from freelance to something bigger, they're scared, they're scared of hiring employees, of having that responsibility, of going through that, but there really isn't any other way. You're not going to have this like automated machine thing that just, I mean, you could get there if you build a tech product one day, but even the best tech companies have tons of employees and have to hire people and go through that. So I think a lot of the times it's just kind of like figuring out what you want and knowing what the cost is.
Yeah, I like that you also said that there's nothing wrong with the freelancer path, because while the question was premised around wanting to grow, that it's not wrong if you don't. It's not wrong if you want to be that freelancer that's at that 10K place either. I never wanted to be stuck there. I always had visions of scaling my agency up big, but I know that there are others that are comfortable there. And well, sometimes us entrepreneurs, and like when we're talking on these podcasts, like we tend to forget those people that want to be there. So I thought that was a cool reference as well.
And I'm jealous of those. Some days I'm jealous of those people, to be honest. Like I've had stressed out afternoons where there's like, issues with clients and employees and all this stuff. I'm like, man, it'd be really cool just to like be a developer right now and just work on. So there is the grass is always greener thing. So I think if you're in that freelance mode and you're not sure about it, like just know that there's good and bad days and whatever vocation you choose, I guess, right?
In my experience and working with so many agency owners in the Done For You agency program and being one myself, like I think that you'll learn really quickly if you decide to go the agency path and scale up past freelancer, if you're cut out for being a manager. Like you have to step out of a do everything yourself role and step into a management role, but not become like a crazy micromanager, and also have your systems and processes down. And also, it's such a different role as the CEO instead of just a doer as the freelancer. That I think if you're not really cut out for it and you don't enjoy it, you'll find out quick that it's not really enjoyable.
Yeah. And I think that also like very few people focus on learning management and like reading about management and practicing it and getting coaching on it and all these things. It's just sort of like a thing that people inherit. And this isn't just in an entrepreneurial setting. This isn't like, how many times have you been out to dinner with friends and they're complaining about horrible bosses and politics? And it's really just because like nobody's ever trained in how to be a manager.
That's so true. You have to just learn on the fly. Like I love it. Like I really enjoy like working with such like amazing, because like my team is Viral is like the best people ever. Like I brag about them night and day because they're like the best people ever to work with. And so like it's made my role really, really enjoyable. But like I said, there's plenty of people out there that it wouldn't be really their thing. I do want to ask about this though, because you hear a lot about mindset in the entrepreneurial space. So how much do you think mindset plays in the whole grand scheme of things in becoming successful?
Yeah, I mean, obviously a lot. I think, I think mindset is really big in terms of your ability to kind of put things in perspective. And I do think that all the stuff, the dashboards, the numbers, looking at things historically, at least for me personally, everyone's brain is different, but that stuff is useful, because then if you're an agency and you're like looking at Facebook ads or whatever, and and you can see that like, oh, we got a better cost per click last month than we did now, and you're not emotionally affected by that too much. You're like, okay, let me turn some knobs. But it's really no different if you're getting on sales calls or if you have client situations that go up and down. But the effect of that and the amount that you're affected by things going wrong is way, way out of proportion, because you're a human and you're not a robot. So I think the best, this is just one aspect of mindset, I guess, but I think one thing that's really helpful is getting enough like historic perspective. And there's different ways to do that. Journaling helps, dashboards, all that stuff can help, and so on.
Yeah, for me, it's more about like having that mindset routine and really having like clear defined goals, that I think has really helped me. Like, if you, I think we all have like a lot of subconscious beliefs about how good enough we are or what we're actually worth, you know? And I think sometimes as like a startup agency owner or freelancer, like I said, the 10K, trying to get to that 100K, like if they subconsciously believe that they're a 10K entrepreneur, then they're never going to get to 100K because money just doesn't come at you. It doesn't fly at you. And then I'm a real believer of like, you create your own reality and like the universe provides to you what, you feel that you feel and body that you're ready for. And if you just, if that's what you think that you are, then that's what your behavior and actions are going to reflect. And you're going to act like that 10K entrepreneur. Your behavior is going to be a 10K entrepreneur, and that's where you're going to stay. But if you believe that you are destined for more, then your behavior is going to align with that. And that, in my opinion, is what's going to, waterfall into actually achieving that 100K. Like my mind was always way ahead of my actual revenue. And I firmly believe that that's what helped me get to that real revenue, was because in my head, I was like cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, making myself believe that that's where I, am right now. And then that's where I kind of led to believe. So my kind of mindset, I think, is more of a rabbit hole, but, a lot of people have a wide range of mindset stuff.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. And I think like there's a lot of like systems you can set up for getting there. If some people are more naturally open to that. I think if you're not, though, it's like surrounding yourself with as many people as you can that are further ahead than you.
Totally.
It's not easy to do that, because guess what? Those people want to do the same for the next level up and so on. Not
Yeah,
just
and
by
then
revenue,
your subconscious is changing when you're surrounding yourself by all of those people that are so far ahead of you. Like you're kind of like absorbing that information, and their belief systems, which are further along down the line than you are, and you can kind of see yourself, or more easily see yourself in someone like their shoes, versus if you're hanging out with a bunch of people that are far below you, then the same thing is going to happen like by osmosis, but in the other direction. So that's super.
And it's obviously a fine line, because like at some point you do have to sort of like pat yourself on the back and like congratulate yourself for how far you've come, or else you'll just go crazy.
Totally.
But you also have to go keep walking, right?
Tight ropes, always tight ropes.
Yeah.
All right. So sales, we talked about sales a little bit, but sales is often a big bottleneck for agencies. How can an agency build an effective sales team, even if they're a small operation?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think the best way to think about it is division of duties, right? So yeah, in a perfect world, you have a sales team, you have marketing, and kind of like a team that's supporting a BDR, you have a BDR that's qualifying, you have a closer, and so on. So that's prohibitively expensive for most small agencies. What we do is like we're taking over the role of the BDR, and then the foundation of the BDR needs, i.e. the data, the strategy, et cetera, the TM meetings. That's kind of what our team does. But I think if you're doing this on your own and you're the only salesperson, or maybe you have a little bit of help, you've still got to fill out those roles, even if it's you wearing those hats, right? So I think the problem is, when we say sales, people don't really piece that apart, and it covers so many skill sets, but everyone's just like, sales is getting the meeting, closing the meeting, doing everything, which is like silly. If you went to a restaurant, they're not farming the vegetables, they're not doing everything in the whole supply chain, they're making the food. So I think that it's first sort of thinking about the way that we put it out there, and we have a course on this that I can probably plug. Is you kind of have three different hats that are at the beginning stages of that funnel. So for the purposes of getting meetings teed up, just getting meetings teed up, not closing them, there's creative, strategy, and hustle. I'm sorry, creative, operations, and hustle. So creative is like in strategies, figuring out who are we contacting, what are we saying to them that's compelling to get them to talk. That's copywriting, right? That's thinking about your market. That's sitting there and putting big swaths of time into creating that strategy. There's operations, which is like the list building, figuring you might be hiring a list builder or buying a very specialized list or figuring out the software, making sure it's all working. And then there's the hustle, which is actually following up with people, like staying on the ball, making sure that the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed, et cetera. So those are kind of like three distinct skills. For example, the hustle, you can't do that whenever you want. You have to be responding in a timely manner. The other tasks, though, you can build around your schedule, right? You can build the creative around your schedule. You can build the operations around your schedule. So I think if you think about it in that way, and we'll like actually put in time blocks as if you're three different people, that's pretty useful. And then once you have that meeting and you're closing the deal, that's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
But that's a lot of stuff, but hopefully that's useful.
No, that was super useful. I liked, that was a good journey into the weeds there for sales. I absolutely love it. Zooming out a bit here though, how does an agency land their dream clients? I hear that dream clients word a lot in the agency ethos, and I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are on how an agency would land their dream clients.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's simple, though not necessarily easy, and that's basically like build the relationship with them now instead of
Yeah.
waiting around. I think the biggest issue is people are like, well, we need to build this inbound marketing funnel. We need to have case studies. We need to have all our ducks in a row because when we go and we talk to them, and if we're not ready, we're going to burn that relationship, and they're never going to hire us, and they're going to like nobody like. I'm not saying there's nothing you can do to screw things up, but it's usually an overblown fear because it's just like, well, what, how often does that happen that you get on a call and they're not ready to buy from you, or, you didn't position things perfectly. And then they're like, this company's blacklisted. We'll never talk to them again. Like this just it doesn't work like that. Right.
Yeah.
So I think the first thing is de-risking that conversation with the person you want to be talking to in your dream client account. And first, obviously coming up with that list of dream clients.
So not holding them on such a high pedestal.
Yeah, get them off the pedestal, build the relationship, talk to them. You don't have to put too much pressure on yourself either. I think obviously you want a sales process. You don't want to just be like flying by the seat of your pants. You want to try to advance things. But even if you don't, I mean, those people aren't burned. You build that relationship. If you follow up 30, 90 days later, they're going to be very likely to take that call with you. And the follow-up is very simple. It's, hey, we have new stuff we're doing. I wanted to talk to you again. I wanted to see what decision you made since we last spoke 30, 90 days ago. We just worked with a client like yours. I wanted to run the results. There's all sorts of reasons they'll take that call once you have that relationship. So the first thing is just like not being scared and just not waiting to do that,
Yeah. That's really good advice. And like, taking them off the pedestal is a really good first step. And then, like you said, not putting so much pressure on yourself, because if you do put so much pressure on yourself, that's going to come out in the call. And like people pick up on that. Like the tone of your voice changes, the speed of your speech changes, like it all, like the whole sales call will go in the tank if you put so much pressure on yourself that you come across as nervous, which also in many cases translates as desperate to a client. And there's nothing that is a bigger repellent to a sales process than desperation. So it's like you really have to just treat these dream clients like any other client and realize that there are so many out there, right? Like even if you don't land that one, you learned a ton. It wasn't a failure, it was a learning, and you can take those learnings and go over to the next dream client and keep moving, right? So
exactly. And I just say that like if it's a new vertical for you or you're newer to it, there's a great sales coach ad for a long time named John Logar, and he would put it as like sell, teach, or learn, right? So if you're not in a position to sell, teach something. If you can't teach something, then learn. And then oftentimes there's if you ask for money, you get advice. If you ask for advice, you get money kind of dynamic. Like that does play out. If you say we're thinking about setting up this service, this product, whatever, how would you feel about that? People in high places will pay for that sometimes. So that's another way to think about it. And I think another thing to point out is like a lot of the times we're told so there's so much like data and jargon about how, well, there's so much research that's done before anybody agrees to take a sales call, right? How many times have you heard that? Like, people do 500 hours of research before taking the sales call. And sometimes that's true, but what's taken for granted is that those people don't enjoy that process. Like, it's not fun to go read business articles and find out all this stuff. Like, the barrier to just getting somebody on the phone is probably like lower than you think, because people come with their own head trash and they're like, well, I wouldn't respond to this, or I wouldn't take this. And yeah, you're going to have to optimize it. It's not easy to get these calls. That's obviously what we do all day, but usually it might be easier than you think. So
Totally agree. Could not agree more. Last question here. What is your biggest piece of advice? I ask this to everyone that comes on my show. What is your biggest piece of advice for a brand new agency owner that's just starting out? I know there could be a ton of different things we can say. So, if they came to you and you could only tell them one thing, what would you tell them?
Yeah, I think mine's going to be pretty cliche, but it's specialized. I mean, that's the biggest issue that I see with new agency owners or freelancers is they think they're specialized, but they're not specialized enough. So
Yeah.
you can over specialize. That's possible and sell to 3 people, but 90% of the time it's an under specialization issue. So I think that's probably my biggest advice.
Yeah, that's huge. And I also see a lot of people, like, when they get specialized into a niche and they think that that's it too. And like, they'll also, come out with offers that are actually just services. And it's like, no, you selling Facebook ads is not an offer. Even if you're specialized into dentists, like that's not a juicy offer, right? Like,
Right.
you still need to create offers and everything. But I totally agree, like, that it's not even like an option not to be specialized in 2022. I think back when we started, it probably was an option, and you could kind of be like, Facebook ads were so new, and like social media was starting to just become important for brands. And so you could be the social media guy, and that was great.
And that is a way to specialize. Like, you can specialize by service, and at that time it was specialized. But then the problem is with the internet, services become unspecialized very quickly because people flood into the space, right?
Yeah.
So that's one thing. And then if the second piece of advice I think is like, charge enough.
Yeah.
I'm sure you encounter this a lot too, where like we'll talk to newer agency owners and the numbers just don't make sense, because it's like, okay, your sales process, like, it's going to cost so much money in terms of time and cost of acquisition, that if you're charging like 2K a month or 3K a month or something, people, it's just not going to work.
So true.
And then the process of like getting a bigger company to close, yeah, there can be more work, but it's not that much more work. And in a lot of ways, it's easier than if you're trying to get a business owner with no money who owns a pizza place or a dentist office to close. So there is that game. I know a little bit less about it, where it's the volume play and you're selling to like hundreds of small, medium-sized businesses. That is viable. But it's, I think that it's just a different thing, and it can be harder than charging more money to bigger companies.
Totally. So specialize in a niche and raise your prices.
Yeah, the 2 most cliche pieces of advice you could ever imagine, but
love it. No, but it's very practical. It's very practical. Dan, thank you so much for being on the show today. I think it was a super valuable show. And like I said, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, Tyler, great questions. Really had a lot of fun and really appreciate it.